how do you change the game? How do you change a game? How do you change the negotiation from one that could otherwise go to a confrontation into one that's cooperative, one that may be now where both sides are tending to be locked into their positions? How do you move the spotlight, almost like there's a spotlight, over here to focusing on interests, what each side really wants, so that you can arrive at a mutually agreeable solution? It's not easy. And so what I want to talk to you about is, normally, again, in the negotiations I've observed and participated in, people start over here. They start by being entrenched in their positions. And it's interesting. Imagine that you have a customer, for instance, who makes an unreasonable demand on you. They take an unreasonable position. They want you to cut your prices by 20%, whatever it is. Let's just imagine, okay, they take a position. You want them to focus on interest, but they take a position. So if they're unreasonable, our natural reaction to an unreasonable demand is to reject it, is to say no, is to reject that position. When you reject someone's position, what do they usually do? What do they usually do? Usually they dig further into their position. So the question is, how do you move the spotlight? How do you move the conversation? How do you move the focus of attention away from position over here, over to interests, over to creative options? And the key way of doing that is what I want to talk to you about right now. It's to reframe. And I know that my colleague, Paul Schumacher, talked about reframing. I want to talk about reframing being one of your greatest powers in negotiation. But reframing in the sense of moving the spotlight, moving the focus of attention from positions onto interests, onto options, onto criteria of fairness. And the key here, the key art in negotiation, interestingly, we often think of negotiation as talking, right? Each side makes statements to the other. But the key art in negotiation may actually be the art of asking questions. How do you ask questions so that, for example, you can move the spotlight by asking the magic question, why, for instance? You ask the customer, why that demand? Why that position? I just want to suggest to you the power of, instead of framing the negotiation in terms of positions, really looking behind the positions to find out what are the real business interests, what are the real interests, so that you can come up with a creative solution that meets both sides' interests. So it may be asking why, asking questions, why questions. Sometimes the other side doesn't want to tell you their interests. So you can ask an indirect way. You can say, ask not why, but you can ask why not. In other words, say, what would be wrong with adopting this kind of strategy? And the same people who don't want to tell you information about their interess are usually the kinds of people who love to criticize. And they'll say, I'll tell you what's wrong with your proposal. A, there's no, the price is too high, morale will go down, quality will suffer. What are they doing? In the form of criticism, of criticizing your proposal, they're giving you very valuable information about what are their true concerns, what are their interests. So just as customer grievances are some of the most valuable information that we as our companies can receive because it allows us to improve our services and improve our products, the same thing with negotiation. So instead of seeing criticism as a problem, invite criticism. Invite criticism of your proposals because it will help you improve them so that you can figure out how to meet your interests and address the other side's concerns too. Somehow when it comes to negotiation, we arrive with our position, the other side arrives with their position, and no one's talking about, are there 10 other ways of doing this? And yet we know that if we were to generate other ways, 10 other ways of doing it, we would end up with a better solution, better for us and better for the other side. Let me give you just one simple example. I was in Mexico some years ago, and I was talking with the director of the Mexican Children's Museum in Mexico City there. They faced a problem. They wanted to bring a Walt Disney film, an IMAX, to Mexico City. But Disney charges a lot of money for their films, a lot of money. And so they did a business plan, and they realized that they didn't want to make their tickets too high because they want to make it accessible to all the children of Mexico City. So they did a business plan, and they came up with a $200,000 deficit. So they could have said, well, the Disney product is just too expensive, let's forget it. But no, they said no. This is an opportunity to negotiate. This is an opportunity to be creative, to be innovative. So they went to Disney, and they said, tell me something, we'd be interested in bringing that film, the IMAX of Fantasia, to Mexico City. Would you be, are you planning to market this film? And Disney said, of course, we don't go into a country without doing a lot of marketing. They said, do you know what budget you have in mind for what you're marketing? And it was several $100,000. And they said, well, would you mind, we at the Children's Museum of Mexico City, we get a lot of free press coverage. We have excellent relations with the media. They love to come to see the children. I mean, it's just it's a magnet for media. They said, could we have the contract for marketing the film here in Mexico City? And in return for that, can we have a free copy of the film? So what they did was a deal like that, where essentially, instead of saying there's no possible overlap here, they expanded the pie by taking something that was low cost to them, which was their free access to the media, but a very high benefit to Disney, to trade for something that was low cost to Disney, which was an additional imprint of their film, but very high benefit to the children of Mexico City. So one thing you want to ask yourself always is, what is low cost to us, but for example, high value to our customers? What's low cost to us, but high value to our customers? Could it be information? Could it be knowledge? Could it be information about the marketplace? Could it be knowledge about how to use the product? Could it be some kind of quality? And then in return, ask yourself, what's low cost to the customer, but high value to you? It might be a referral, for example. So you're always probing in any negotiation, looking, can we expand the pie? Can we bring more issues on the table to really make for a richer mix so that we can solve the problem? So that's what you're trying to do. It's almost like there's a pile of gold on the table in front of you when you're negotiating with the other side. And so often we walk away from the table leaving all that gold. That gold is the amount of potential joint gain, there might be for us and for the other side. Or we walk away from the table and we leave a lot of gold still on the table. The way to get at the gold is to invent. It's to be creative. The role that objective criteria or independent standards play in negotiation is critical, because what they do is, when you have that, then you can say, okay, yes, maybe I got a little bit less money, but it's because we have a much smaller department and they have a much larger department. Then when it comes for you to be able to go back to your people and explain why you got less money, you have an explanation. There's something based on fair. It's a lot easier to accept. And so there's a power here in negotiation, which is the power of legitimacy. And so it's why it's so important when you present proposals to the other side to think about what are the objective criteria that make them fair. When you think about your own situation, when you think about what you're asking, think about what are the objective criteria that make them fair. And think about, for example, one of the things I notice that people do when they say, okay, tell me, what's your price? The first thing we do is we put the price. And then the customer says, well, that's a lot, And then they say, why is the price so high? And then maybe you say, well, it's because of this and this and that. But they already have the price in their head. They're already reacting emotionally. You may be better off in a negotiation putting the objective criteria first and saying, let me tell you how we get to the price. These are our costs. This is a quality thing. We do this, we do that, whatever. You go through the whole rationale, and then you say, and that's what gets us to this premium price. Then you have all that time to be able to persuade the other side that what you're about to present to them is fair. So again, When you think about negotiation, think about the power of independent standards, the power of objective criteria, because psychologically they transform a situation, a dilemma, that's in every single negotiation, which is, am I going to be taken advantage of? This fear, am I going to be taken advantage of? No one wants to make concessions. No one wants to give in just to the will of the other side, just because the other side says so. And so, once you have objective standards, then you can say, okay, I'm not giving in to the other side, I'm deferring to something that seems legitimate or fair. That's the market value. It's a lot easier for people to accept that, and it's a lot easier for them to go back and explain to their people why they accepted this deal. So again, something to think about here. In negotiation, you expand the pie, and then you divide up the pie by using independent standards. If you're trying to get to yes, one of the most important instruments you have in getting to yes, paradoxically, is the word no. Because in life, it's not just about getting to yes, it's about getting to the right yes, the yes that satisfies your interests. And I learned this lesson many years ago. After having written Getting to Yes, I was working and I was working on US-Soviet negotiations at that point, and I was looking for funding, and I had a meeting with the celebrated investor Warren Buffett. And I had breakfast with Mr. Buffett, and Mr. Buffett said to me, Warren Buffett said to me, he said, you know, I don't understand all this yes stuff. He said, in my line of business, the most important word is no. He said, what I do is I sit at my desk in Omaha and I look at one investment possibility after another, one investment deal after another, and I say, no, no, no. He said, I might look at 1,000 potential deals, say no, because I know exactly what I'm looking for. He said, and when I see exactly what I'm looking for, then I say yes. And he said, all I have to do is say yes to 5 or 6 good deals, and look at me, I'm a billionaire. So what the insight behind that to me is that oftentimes to get to the right yes, it requires us to be able to say no to the wrong deals. In order to say yes to our high priorities, in order to be strategic in our products and services, we often have to say no to a lot of other things in order to focus on what's really genuinely going to bring us that success. So no and yes are very much interlinked. No is the key word of strategic focus. In order, and particularly in today's times, when we're all so busy and there's so many possibilities coming at us in this new globalized, information-rich environment, the ability to say no, to discern, to say no to some things in order to say yes to others. That's what's key here.
Negotiation is one of the main tools in being able to resolve and deal with conflict. But there's another important thread that's even more fundamental, and that is the talent and the leadership skills that drive how conflict and negotiations are dealt with. As we look at the whole puzzle, you can begin to see that those people who are truly effective in dealing with conflict and negotiation also tend to be very, very good leaders. We heard this morning from Prime Minister Howard, his experience of dealing with 3 of probably multiple conflicts around the world, and how leadership was a part of that. The values that drove him, the values that guide the person or the leader to be able to know how to see their way through that conflict. You want to be effective at negotiating and conflict resolution and at leading, you must take control of your mind's eye. To be good at conflict management and negotiation and leadership, you must be positive. You cannot be cynical and negative and be effective at leading or negotiating. Now, we've all heard, or maybe you've heard of Andy Grove, who wrote a brilliant book called Only the Paranoid Survive from Intel. Well, he's a dear friend of Warren Bennis, who's also a friend of mine, and Warren recently wrote an article for Forbes magazine saying, today, in the world of uncertainty we live in, it's not the paranoid who survive, it's the optimists who survive. Never forget that. You cannot be an inspiring leader or an inspiring negotiator if you are not fundamentally positive. We've had a myth put on us that people naturally resist change. And if you are a negotiator, you're dealing with conflict, you're dealing with leading situations, and you start by the attitude people naturally resist change, you're going to make a big problem for yourself. In fact, what people resist is the pain of change, the fear of the unknown. That is true. The second line, your brain, the neuron system in your brain needs challenge, needs curiosity, needs change to help stimulate and create new neurons. Leaders need a secure base, and what we're going to see shortly is that when you have a secure base, then this early warning system, which can make you crazy, can put you into an amygdala hijack, can make you worry too much, make you even paranoid and over-suspicious. This early warning system shuts down so that you want to explore. This is what happens with children. Children who are with a secure base, a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, they don't want to stay with that secure base. They want to go out and explore. But then they come back to the protection, the comfort, the energy of that secure base until they go out again. Have you seen that with children? The same thing is true with adults. We need secure bases till the day we die. If your boss is a secure base, or in a conflict situation where you're mediating or you're negotiating, you are a secure base, then you shut down this defensiveness, and pretty soon you start looking only for possibilities. The sad story is, with the economic crisis, with all that's happened, in the United States, only about 22% of people trust their boss. It means the majority of people are trying to survive. And if you are surviving, you will not thrive. You have to move to playing to win. That's why we know the 80% who are playing not to lose, they're afraid to take a risk, afraid to look silly, afraid to make a mistake, they're going to limit their potential. In conflict management, negotiation, the best negotiators, they take the right calculated risk, but it is counterintuitive. You have to control your brain, because if fear drives you, then it's going to pull you back and you're not really going to be looking for what is possible. And people resist being changed. They like to have choice. The point is, can you understand the benefit of change? And if people can understand the benefit, you can motivate them to go towards that benefit, but not until you understand the pain behind it. That's what behavioral economics is about, and it's a revolution in understanding. Isn't this an incredible insight? That loss is more powerful in motivating than benefit. Unless you are a high performer, unless you're playing to win, then benefit is overriding your fear of pain. And lastly, can you find the benefit in every change? And for conflict management, it's fundamental to understand without the bond, you do not go the next step. And in organizations, the leaders, the teams, throughout that system must be effective in being able to do that bonding. What do the great champions do? They practice, practice, practice. You want to be great at anything? 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. 5, 6, 7 days a week, relentless. And it takes 10 to 15 years to be a real champion. About 5 years to be a master at something. That's why if you're promoted because you're good at IT or engineering or law or marketing into a leadership position, does that make you a leader? No, you need a whole history behind that. And that's been one of the mistakes organizations have made, is that they've not developed leadership talent strongly enough. What else do? They practice in the correct way. You need a coach. You need a teacher. Now that doesn't mean you have to hire an executive coach. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody has to show you how to do it correctly. Talking, dialogue, and negotiating are a tool that fits all together. You can never be a good negotiator if you're not good at dialogue. And you will never be good at dialogue if you can't talk in an effective way. And Dan Goldman has this wonderful quote, that personal competence comes from being aware of one's own emotions and regulating them, and social competence is awareness and regulation of others' emotions. This is the key, self-management.